My name is Alex Wolfson. Thank you for coming to my panel. This is why you should create a webcomic. In case this might be hentai stripping or anything like that. We talk about why to create a webcomic. Before I get started, let me ask just a couple quick questions from the audience here. First of all, how many of you are creators who have a comic already, or writing, or anything like that? How many of you are a creator or would like to be a creator, like to aspire to be a creator, and have friends who are creators? Okay. How many of you already have a webcomic that's currently posting? Okay, great. My name is Alex Wolfson. I've done 2 webcomics so far. I've done a comic called Artifice. It's complete. It's a science fiction story about a prototype android who was sent on his very first mission to attack a team of scientists who knew too much, and he failed spectacularly at that mission. He let one boy live for some reason. In this mission where he's supposed to kill everyone, and then the corporation had questions and tried to figure out what went wrong and tried to nail him down. And that was the science fiction story. Now I'm doing a current story, a superhero story called The Young Protectors, which is about a young hero named Kyle who's closeted, who goes into a gay bar for her very first time and is very proud of that and steps out and runs into the most dangerous supervillain in the world. And then the price that supervillain asks to keep his secret is a kiss, and then things go from there. It's actually a quite serious story as it turns out to be, but there's it has quite a bit of fun too. So I have those 2 webcomics. Originally, basically my background is as a filmmaker. My day job is actually editing film and video for corporations, so it's not as sexy. You know, when I say filmmaker, it sounds somewhat sexy. It's not sexy at all. The kind of stories I like to tell are visual. Originally, I wrote plays for theater, and I like to see that up on the stage, and I wrote stuff for film. But in particularly, you probably heard, if you've seen me talk before, I mean, one of my deals is, as a gay kid growing up, I loved science fiction and action stories, but I never got to see what I really wanted to see. And for me, that meant something that was a really good genre story first, like a good science fiction story first, a good superhero story first, with a hero who just happened to like guys. And by focusing on genre stories, those tend to, in film, be relatively big budget. I had made some films myself, so I knew exactly what was involved and how much it cost to do that. And the kind of films I wanted to do were going to be too expensive for me to make by myself. They were also not going to be something Hollywood was going to fund. You know, I think things are changing a little bit. I would like, maybe in 5 or 10 years from now, that might change. You know, and I actually have some real hope around that. But when I started down this journey in the world of comics, that was completely unrealistic. You would think that they would fund something like that, and at the kind of production quality and budget level that I was hoping to have happen. But for the price of a short film, you can do a feature-length story in comics, and you have an unlimited special effects budget. So that's how I got into comics. And originally my plan was that I released them as PDFs. You would sign up for my mailing list, and you'd get sent links to free PDFs. You can still do that. You can sign up for my mailing list, and you get the links to the PDFs that I did before. And it seemed like that was a good strategy, because within like a year, I had 20,000 people on that mailing list. It was all very exciting, and then it went to 25,000. But when I was at that 25,000, I'd been doing it for a couple of years, and I came to Yaoi Con. So this was, I guess, 4 years ago I went to Yaoi Con, thinking, okay, this is my tribe. I do Yaoi 911. I have a lot of people get excited about my comics. I have 25,000 people on the mailing list. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody. And you know, I don't have a big ego around it, but I thought maybe 1 or 2 people might have heard of my comic. Nobody did. But everyone had heard about this particular comic, or 2 comics actually, one called Starfighter, and the other called Tea House. And they were webcomics. And I had a big chip on my shoulder about webcomics, because I'm somebody who likes a satisfying chunk. You know, I don't even buy the floppies for the regular Western comics. I want to get the trade paperback, right? And the idea of reading a comic a page a week sounded crazy to me. And torturous. And yet, as I was hearing all this kind of excitement around Starfighter and Tea House, I realized I actually did read a webcomic. I read Starfighter. And why did I read Starfighter? Because I had a friend of mine who every single update tweeted about this comic Starfighter. And for the first 5 times I ignored it, and the 10 times I ignored it, 15 times I ignored it. After about 30 times, like, all right, I'll take a look at this comic you keep tweeting about. And that's when I got hooked. And then it was at that moment where I kind of put 2 and 2 together. I'm not initially very bright, but I kind of get there eventually. that I realized, okay, this is what I should do, because one of the big advantages of webcomics is the idea of momentum. I mean, what would happen with the PDF is it would take me like 8 or 9 months to put together a PDF chapter. I'd put it out, there'd be lots of excitement for a whole week. People would comment on my blog, it'd be all great, and then I'd go silent for the next 8 months. And one thing in terms of building an audience that is so important is continuously showing up. And one of the things that I'll tell you in terms of like success in webcomics, so much of webcomics, I mean, there's important things about webcomics in terms of quality and in terms of the kind of material you're putting out and how you're promoting it, but so much of success in webcomics is being the last person standing. Because many webcomics, first of all, totally fail. If you have any experience with webcomics, they fail, they stop, they stall, you know, all kinds of things happen. If you show up, though, consistently, when you say you're going to, you will build an audience, you can keep an audience that way. So so that's sort of the overview of my background. So then I started Artifice of webcomic. I had basically, the thing that got me to really jump into webcomics is I'd done these short chapters of a comic called Tough, which had a Filipino-American hero. Like I said, you can still download the first 3 chapters of that. But I had this other comic called Artifice that I was really proud of. I was working with a fantastic artist called Winona Nelson, who currently works on Magic the Gathering cards. I was really very happy about the story, and my plan was to release that at like $4.99. That was going to be the comic people were going to pay for, right? You download PDFs, but this PDF you're going to pay for, right? But I had the experience of not only having nobody recognize me at Yaoi Con, but I released some of the Tough chapters as print-on-demand books you could get for just a few dollars. And again, I had 25,000 people on my mailing list. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to have huge sales, but maybe 100 people would be willing to buy this thing that they're so excited about. I sold 10 copies. And so again, that was a real wake-up call that this was not the right way for me to get the work out, and particularly for Artifice, which was very close to my heart. I'm like, I could put this out there and maybe 20 people would read it, maybe 100 if I was really lucky. But I really want people to read this work. And so that's where it's like, you know what, I'd rather build an audience and have people read my work than make money. If you're into comics, that's a really good attitude to have, by the way. And so that's when I'm like, all right, I'm going to post it up for free. I'm going to post it up once a week for free as a webcomic. And I started off, I put it out on my list, and I put out the notice, and I started out with 300 readers per update. That's actually really good for an update for people who are just starting off with webcomics. If you don't already have that kind of connection, you might get 20 people in the beginning while you develop your audience. So 300 was pretty good. But over the year of me continuously showing up and doing the things I'm going to talk about here, I was able to grow that to about 7,000 or 8,000 people showing up every update, and then 10,000 people. And then I had a Kickstarter, which I gave a panel yesterday of why, how to succeed at Kickstarter. And for that, when Artifice was finished, I wanted to print it as a book, and I wanted to do it as high quality, so I asked for $7,000 to raise in 30 days. And I wound up getting $36,000. So I was actually able to print the book. And get it printed exactly how I wanted, in really nice paper. And I learned an important lesson that a webcomic is an awesome way to build an audience. In particular, if you're looking at the overall business model, I'm going to cut to the chase and give you a little secret here, that ultimately, if you're going to make money in comics, with webcomics, they talk about merchandising, about t-shirts, they talk about everything else. Really, the best merchandise you're going to have for your webcomic is a book. That's what's going to sell most at cons, that's going to sell most every place else. And so finding a way so you can raise funds to print a book is very important. And that involves building an audience, and then ultimately I think that involves building an audience and having a Kickstarter. I'm not going to get too much into Kickstarter because I talked about that yesterday, but a webcomic is sort of the perfect way to do that. In particular because there's something that, with Web 2.0 companies, you might have heard something called the freemium model. So it's not premium, it's freemium. Mm-hmm. And with that idea is you give something away for free that's of total and complete value. That's not hobbled in any way. But if you want something extra, then you pay a little bit extra, premium, right? And a webcomic, I give all my work away for free. You can read it all. If you wanted to read this book right now, you can go on the web, you can just read the whole darn story for free. But it's much more pleasant to read it in book form, and I have some special features in here too. And so if you want to read in book form, in the case, at the end of when I finished the webcomic run of this, I asked people if they wanted to fund the Kickstarter, and then they got excited and they did that. And there is that sort of desire to support you in that way. But also, even just now, it's like if people are curious about my work, I'm like, read it online, see if you like it. And if you like it, come by and get the book. And people, most of the time, will do that. And so that's another reason why, I mean, I have a publicist. When I finished, one of the things I used for the Kickstarter money was getting a publicist to promote Artifice, and that was some good money spent. I got a review in Publishers Weekly, and we were a Lambda Literary Award finalist this year, and that was all very cool. But when she was horrified to hear that I was going to keep the comic up for free online, and I just have to tell you, it's the smartest thing to do is let people have it for free, and people still buy the book. And particularly, one thing, a person came up to me yesterday and they said, make sure you tell everyone tomorrow that they need to watermark all their pages. They need to do that, and I recommend that. You want to make sure your work is credited, and if you work with artists like I do, you want to make sure their work is credited and they have a way to get back to your website to read the whole comic. But the biggest challenge for any beginning creator, because a lot of creators get really worried about piracy, honestly, your biggest challenge as a beginning creator is not piracy, it's obscurity. And giving your work away for free is the best way to build an audience. And then at the end, if you have a book or something, there is a way to then monetize it. So I just kind of launched into this a little bit. I just wanted to back up for 1 second. Does everyone here know what a webcomic is? Does anybody here not know what a webcomic is? Okay, so a webcomic, basically you know what a regular comic is. You've got a book, you can read it in pages. What a webcomic is, it's a page of a comic posted up on the web that you can read, and it's posted up on a schedule. A typical schedule is once a week. Sometimes people do twice a week. If you're really ambitious and your art style can support this level of output, some people do 5 days a week. Like there's a comic called Dumbing of Age that I like quite a bit. They do that 5 days a week. Dave Willis, very cool guy. For somebody like me who likes to do the naturalistic art, there's no way we could do 5 days a week. So my comic is 2 days a week. And you show up and you do that. So that's part of it, is that people can read it 1 page a week, or twice a week, or whatever your update schedule is. The second part is that you'll have a comment section, or some kind of way for your community to participate. And that's just as important as the comic. Yes?
What formats are popular though? Static images, or do people still do PDF, but 1 page at a time, or do people use Flash version?
So the PDF, you want to do it as a PDF because that requires a download. You want to make sure that you click on the page and you can see the page. There's 2 ways of doing it. There is static and there's Flash. Well, there's a very, very good gay comic, very good $1 a click. It can be quite expensive. Or even 20 cents is a lot to pay. With Project Wonderful, if you're paying more than 4 cents a click, then you should probably look at your ads and where you're advertising and what they look like. You can go up to 10 cents a click on Project Wonderful depending on where you are, but really, if I'm paying more than 4 cents a click, then I'm looking to change something up. And so that means you can get quite a bit of clicks for not a whole lot of money. But $20 a month is a good chunk of money to put in advertising that will get you big results. And you don't even have to do that. You can do $5 a month. Whatever you can do, but you're going to want to advertise some way through that. And like I said, I recommend Project Wonderful for doing that. In terms of monetizing webcomic, there are 3 ways to do it. There's donations, there's advertising on your own site. You host ads and people will pay you to advertise on your site. And then there's merchandise. For donations, pretty much everyone has a little donation clicky bar. And that's awesome. I put that up myself, a little donation clicky bar. Or a little donation button. And that was fine. Nobody really clicked on it, but that was fine. And then one of the readers suggested, hey Alex, I saw this other comic, what they do is they have a thing like when you reach a certain donation target, they put up a page early. So they put up, instead of 1 page a week, which is what I offer, they put up 2 pages a week. And well, I had this buffer of 50 pages. I'm like, oh, well, that's clever, I can do that. And so what I did is I put up a little donation bar, and I wanted it to be high enough so it would be a big event like when this happened. So I said, $250. When we hit $250 of donations, I'll put up a page for that week. So it took about 3 months to hit that first time, at $250. It was fun, there was a lot of celebration, in the comments people were all excited. I had 2 pages up that week, very excited. And built up a little extra momentum for that. So then the next one was a month and a half later. And then the next time it happened was 3 weeks later. And then I hit the sex scene. And then it was every page. Every week after that, we hit that target. And I'm like, all right, well, it's a sex scene. That's what's happening. People want to see the goodies. Once that's over, that'll stop. But it didn't. It kept going through the whole rest of the comic. And part of that's because I do thrillers. And so I like to keep the stakes high, and I like to keep things moving that way. So, and people just wanted to know what was going to happen next. And once they get hooked on 2 pages a week, they didn't want to go back to 1 page a week. And then for the Young Protectors, because I had 2 artists I was working with Artifice, I was working with a great artist named Winona Nelson. For the Young Protectors, I'm working with 2 great artists, Marvel DC penciler Adam DeCrocker and Marvel DC colorist Veronica Gandini. I raised the donation target to $400 because I pay my artists. I pay them, I can't pay them what DC and Marvel pays them, but I pay them real money. And so that's where the donation bar basically pays. It offsets my costs for that, and not even whole. I mean, it offsets part of my cost for that. Makes it affordable for me. So that I asked for $400 to hit the bonus page. Well, again, for that it took about a month to hit the first one, and then a couple weeks for the next one, and then we've basically been going solid for the last 2 years. Every week we've been hitting $400 on that. They gave me a week off after the Kickstarter, because I begged them to. That I needed 1 week off where I can just chill out and sleep. But it's been going very solid. So that's something I really recommend for you, and it's a benefit of having a buffer, is have that donation bar, offer to put up a page early a week, or whatever. It could be extra art, it could be something sexy, but something to give it kind of a gift back, where you're giving back a bit. And it gives it something where the readers can have a way to show their generosity, but also can build momentum and can build some excitement, and you'll really take advantage of the fact that you have a community that you're building together. Advertising is another way to make money. Here's a little secret tip for you. If you do have a sexy webcomic, it really limits who will host advertising on your site. Like, really limits it in a big way.
It's 11:30, just so you know.
Thank you. For example, I mean, I was getting over 100,000 unique visitors a day, or a month, and over 2 million clicks on my website each month. That should be getting me, you know, they do this sort of thing where you get, like the main web advertisers will do what's called click per CPM, click per mille, which is click per 1,000 clicks, and it's typical for that to be, you know, 10 cents or even up to like $1 with that. You know, you should be making with each of your ads, in that case, like $2,000 a month. So I could be making $8,000, except I have sexy gay men in my comic, and they won't even touch my comic. They won't even look at me. The only advertising service that was willing to accept my work was Project Wonderful. And that's one reason why I'm a big believer in them, because as a webcomic creator, they've been totally supportive. But here's a little tip for you. If you are really interested in making money in advertising, then don't have sexy comics. And that's a sad reality of the world is right now, but that's your, and I'm telling you from one who knows. Now for me, I have my own vision. I'm going to make the comics I want to make. I'm just going to accept that advertising is not going to be something that makes a lot of money, but I make okay money. Again, if you're looking to get rich, I'm not recommending comics for you. I mean, and I do okay. I mean, you know, my readers are good clickers, and so people do advertise on my site, and they talk about how our readers really click well. So you know, I bring in anywhere from $20 to $30 a day on that, which is pretty gosh darn good. But it's not enough. It's not quite your day job money. It's just it helps with my hosting and things like that. In terms of merchandise, I am a really slow learner in terms of figuring out how to make merchandise work. I'll give you some general rules. For your merchandise, you should be looking to try to make about 70% profit on everything that you make. Because with shipping and with manufacturing costs, with everything else, everything just gets, because you're own one-person band, it all gets eaten up so quickly. And if you have a smaller margin than that, you're not actually going to make any money. This was a little tip that Tea House women gave me. They are like geniuses at marketing. Like you want to crib on marketing, go just look at their site, look at what they're offering. Like they're like brilliant. And one of the other tips they said is like, no t-shirts, don't do t-shirts, like no capes. No t-shirts. Like, why didn't I do t-shirts? Like they're heavy, you have to carry them lots of different sizes. No t-shirts, Alex. Yeah, here's an example of like why the webcomic community is so great. Like I went to the Tea House. Like when I was at that con where nobody knew who I was. It was the next year. It was the next year. I had just started the webcomic, so some people were beginning to know who I was. And I went to the Tea House booth, and I just met them for the first time. And I just wanted to say that I liked their work, and I was going to buy some stuff too. And CC grabs me, says, "You, come here!" And she pulls me away and like, gives me literally an hour-long lecture on merchandising, because she knew I needed the help. But that's the kind of graciousness that you have in this kind of community. And so one of the things that was no t-shirts. I've just started to try t-shirts just to try them. you know, it's a learning curve. But the book is going to be your main thing you're going to sell. You're going to figure out what works. Just try a whole bunch of different things and see what sells. It's going to be different for each of your audiences. I think, because you gave me the little signal there, I'm going to open this for a question. What's our time right now? Where are we at?
It is 11:33.
Okay. Let me open this up for questions. Are there any questions people have? Yes?
I've seen lately a lot of, especially in terms of producing apps, a lot of money going towards creating comics that instead of being in a paid format are the long kind of Korean-inspired format. But I don't see webcomics as going that direction. So I don't know what do you see any potential in that?
I see a lot of people, a lot of investors who hope there's potential in that.
I see that too.
I mean, you know, it's an interesting thing because we're trying to import like a model that works in the East here in the West. Sometimes things translate okay, and sometimes things really don't. I think that whatever needs to happen, make that happen, isn't happened yet. I've had a couple of different groups approach me to put my comics on their site. I won't say what those groups are, but they approached me, and they even had business models where they were offering to just pay me even though they weren't getting any revenue itself. I'm a big believer in sustainability, and that's one reason why I believe in having a buffer. It's one reason I believe that you pay artists for their work. It's one reason why I think you do think about, if you aren't going to get rich doing this, but think about a way to make enough money so that you can pay for what you're doing, so you don't have to stop, because it's a great disservice to your readers if you have to stop. I mean, there are webcomic artists out there who refuse to have any advertising on their site for personal reasons or whatever, and I bow to that if that's their choice. I think, for me, seeing an advertising on a webcomic site doesn't look cluttery at all, and particularly if you are good about not including advertising that has animation or you have some discretion about that. I understand that people need to pay for their web hosting, you know. So, in terms of my response to that, is I begged off in each of those cases because I just didn't see the sustainability there. And in both cases, I feel good about that choice. One of those places folded. And on the other hand, just to give you a clue in terms of you're looking for my advice about future prediction, I didn't think the web was going to catch on. I thought, no, it's just going to be for geeks like me. It's never going to be any business model. No one's going to make any money on it. I also, when I moved to San Francisco, and prices were, I came from Vermont, and you could get a flat for $200,000. I'm like, oh, that's way too expensive. That's going to go down. So anyway, so take what I'm saying with a little grain of salt, but that's my thoughts on that. Next question.
I got a microphone. Everyone else can hear.
We got a microphone.
Oh, okay.
Based on what she was saying, I think earlier you mentioned about how clicks help you with your revenue. So is not doing it Korean style because you're gonna lose clicks?
Okay, well actually, here's the real answer. I'm really glad you both have asked that question. Again, it goes down to you want to have a book at the end. Okay? And so in particular, what I'm going to recommend you do is that you actually create your comics in what's called CMYK format. There's two different kinds of color spaces. And if this sounds kind of complicated, it's really easy things to read on the web, but basically the short answer is your computer is thinking RGB, red, green, and blue, whereas most printers, and they actually have pixels that are red, green, and blue, they're a little light that do those colors, and you mix those together, you get any other color you want. Printer inks don't come, for professional printer inks, they don't come in red, green, and blue. They come in CMYK, cyan, magenta, Y, and black, which is the K part of that. And so, it's really easy to go from CMYK to RGB in terms of converting. So if you create the page in CMYK and go to RGB, that's really straightforward. Going from RGB to CMYK can have some issues. And in particular, one other thing you want to do is you want to create the size in the size you're going to print at. And if you do a non-standard size, you're tying your hands when you go to retailers. I really wanted my book to be 8.5 by 11. I wanted it to be big and beautiful like this. And Diamond Distributors, which is the sole distributor to kind of the Western comic book stores, refused to bring my book in because it was 8.5 by 11. They said, oh, if you do it regular comic book size, we'll do it. If you're willing to reformat the whole thing and do that, but not 8.5 by 11. Anything, and this is not a really wacky size. There's lots of 8.5 by 11 books out there, and that that in itself limited where I could distribute it. If you choose something like a really thin panel book or whatever, really offside, if your muse demands that you do that, I'm not going to stand in your way, but you just realize that you're really hurting your ability to sell in retail if you choose something non-standard. I'm going to answer that question. Did you have a follow-up?
I actually had another question.
Let me answer that question
Yeah.
back then, I'll come back here.
When it comes to the longer strips, I suppose you could do like 3 per page and keep going with the standard size. One of the comment I had was if you wanted to start something but you're not sure, do I really want to put my money into this? Do I really want to do that? If anybody here has Tumblrs, Tumblr has a webcomic layout that you can use. And it's cheaper, to start up. I think if you pay the Tumblr rate, you can get your own website heading as opposed to, this webcom like .tumblr.com. And that's a good way to maybe start and then move over to your own web hosting if it's successful.
It's certainly something that, Tumblr can be a really useful way to promote your work, any kind of social, definitely, if you're going to do a webcomic, you've got to be involved with social media, Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter. You've got, like I said, what got me reading Starfighter? Seeing my friend retweet Hamlet Machines, I've got a page posted up 30 times, and you want to make sure that you make that as easy as possible for people. Definitely having your own domain name is important, and I definitely, if you decide to go with another route, I recommend using your own domain name. But having your own website means you can have post advertising on it. It means you can have a donation bar. It means a bunch of other things. And if you do it at the beginning, it's hard, once you set something up, it's hard to change the momentum of it. And so my advice is, unless you are really deeply involved in the Tumblr community, so you can just transfer your Tumblr followers over, is that you really do consider having your own website. But Tumblr is a good option if that's something that you're more comfortable with. We got a question behind you.
Hi. What do you think about some of the newer webcomics out there are using this service called Betrayon, where they have, some of them have actually moved their comics over to Betrayon, and some maintain like the free version of their website, and then they have their Betrayon site where people come and they pay a certain amount of money and they get all kinds of extras and whatever, or dirty stuff or what have you. But what do you think about that service, using that service as an option for your webcomic?
I think Patreon is a really good thing. It's a crowdfunding service. As you know, I'm a big believer in Kickstarter. And Patreon is another, that's a form of crowdfunding. Patreon is another form where basically people agree to pay you a certain amount of money every month, just as being donators essentially, to be pledgers, and then you offer something back in return. Some kind of special access to behind the scenes, or as you said, extra sexy pages or something like that. I think that's a great idea, particularly because advertising can be so challenging to be stable. Like one month you might make a certain amount of money, the next month you make like 10% that amount of money. Whereas Patreon offers the promise of having consistent income. And again, it's a way to translate, if you have built a bigger audience, into some real money. For me, because I have this donation bar thing going already, and I'm bringing in $1,600 a month, I don't think I could ask my audience to kind of pay more than what already that's coming up with right there. And frankly, more to the point, I don't have any more bandwidth for any more content. At 2 pages a week, and plus the extra Kickstarter stuff I'm doing, I just don't have the bandwidth to create more content, and I wouldn't ask people to donate more money on top of the donation bar without offering some extra goodies. But it is successful. I know a lot of creators who don't have the donation bar going, where it's very successful for them, and I recommend you look into it for sure. One thing I would caution you about, just by my own model, is putting your own comic behind any kind of paywall. If it's some extra goodies, great. If it's like the hot, sexy stuff that you couldn't put on your thing anyways because of advertising, fine. But if you're actually keeping your content behind a paywall, I think you're limiting your ability to build your audience. I think that can be a little reader hostile. And I think that it's much better to give everything for free and then try to make your money on something like a book. I think that if you're really concerned about trying to generate income, I think you're going to have more success with that model than putting it behind the paywall. I'm going to answer the follow-up question, then I'll answer the question back there.
I remember you saying that you had buffer pages of like 50 before you posted your comic, which is really, really a great idea. But in terms of how long does it take you to make one page of your comic? Like, would you say like 1 week, 2 weeks, like from when you start sketching to when you do the final draft of like coloring and all that stuff?
Well, with the Young Protectors, where I have a team myself, the penciler Adam DeCrocker and the colorist Veronica Gandini. Well, first thing, one thing that helps is my part of it's always done, in terms, or at least my initial part of it is done. In that I write the scripts well in advance, and I feel after experiences with TV shows like Lost and the X-Files, I feel very strongly that if I'm going to take my readers on a journey, particularly a thriller journey with questions, I need to know what the answers are. I need to make sure those answers are satisfying. So I don't even start publishing anything until I have the ending written. So the script part is done, but that doesn't mean that my part of the work is done, because I'm very involved as a creator. I mean, I'm very involved, so I do a lot of notes. And so basically, our process that we go through is I get the scripts to my artist, I get the script down to Crocker, he sends me thumbnail pages. I do what's called a full script, where I say, here's how many panels are on each page, here's what we see in each panel, here's what the dialogue is in each panel. He then thumbnails out the pages. We go back and forth, like up to 2 different revisions on that. Most of the thing I'm focusing on is whether I was clear in my script and anything's missing from detail-wise, but in particular, I really care about the acting of my characters. I think I do a lot of stuff with subtext, where people say one thing and mean another. And so often in my script, I'll have like what they say, and then underneath subtext, this is what they would really say if they were actually saying what they meant. And Adam is a genius about getting that kind of subtlety of expression. So is Winona. That's a main thing I look for in an artist, in addition to overall draftsmanship. We go back and forth, and then once I approve the thumbnails, then we do pencils, and then we might have a back and forth there of me giving notes back and forth. And then it comes back to me, and I send it off to Veronica, and she does coloring, and we do back and forth there, 2 or 3 revisions. Then it comes back to me, I do the lettering, I create the page to post up. I can tell you how long it takes when we're hustling, because we have run out of a buffer every now and then. And it takes about 4 days if we're really hustling. And that's if we've had a chance to get ahead a little bit and have the thumbnails done ahead of time. So 2 pages a week really is our maximum. That's us going balls to the wall, trying to get things done. So,
And if you're not hustling?
if we're not hustling, I'd say a week a page.
Okay.
You know, for some of the special ones like the double page spread we just posted up, they take a little bit longer. You know, a week a page is means we're not going crazy. And that's why posting up a page a week is a pretty reasonable rate for a webcomic. Okay, a question back there?
This refers back to what you were saying about advertisers, like if you are 18 and up. And I was really curious, if, like, say your webcomic doesn't have sex at all, but it's about like 2 gay men, does it automatically throw you into the adult section, or? No, and luckily those days are sort of behind us. I mean, if you call your comic Yaoi something, it will. Like, you have to be a little, I mean, I had this brilliant idea of my comics because it's about guys rescuing guys and having Yaoi 911 be my branding. But unfortunately, having that in my domain name meant that we enter in your domain name in some of these advertising things you want to sign up for, they just spit you out right there. They just look at the Yaoi and they're done. So be smart about the title of your thing. My comics are R-rated. They're pretty sexy, but I find it sexier if you don't necessarily go hardcore with spurting fluids and raging weenies. So my Kickstarter backers are going to get some raging weenies because they've asked for that very strongly. But in general, for my storytelling, I find that to be a bit of a distraction. But even R-rated is too much, like bare butts and naked hugging can be a bit much. But if you really are PG and it's just gay characters, gay heroes, at this day and age, we're beyond the point with 30-something where you show 2 men who are kissing and then all the advertisers bail and all that. People are a lot sharper than that. So I'd say if your use wants to be PG, maybe even PG-13, I think you'll be pretty okay. Any questions over on this side right here? I want to make sure.
I have a 2-part question. With going on with the NC-17 or rated R, did you have any trouble with host providers? I know some host providers will cut you off.
Luckily, no, and also luckily no with PayPal too, which I use my donations. PayPal is can be notorious for cutting you. And I think if I had the X-rated content, that probably would limit me from having PayPal, and PayPal is what I use for my donation bar. And that comes from actually the credit cards. Like credit cards are fine with you if you want to buy like DVD porn, like hard copy porn. They're great with that. They don't want you to do digital download porn because you get that immediate gratification, and so people being people, they create false credit cards and things like that, and there's a lot of credit card fraud with that. And so PayPal responding to that, if you have anything that's like a digital download of porn, they want to stay away from that.
I have one quick question. Do you, are you working on some third script or third webcomic?
There is another webcomic I want to do. First of all, I'm making The Unprotectors, which is a superhero comic, and that's focusing, it's the engaging the enemy arc. It's focusing on Kyle, who is that closeted kid who has fire powers. I know what the next arc will be. It's going to involve another character called Spooky Jones, if any of you are familiar with. Yep. If there's interest, I mean, I always think I never take my readers' interest for granted. I mean, at the end of the comic, if there's interest, then I'll go on, I'll create that. But there's actually a whole other webcomic that I've been itching to kind of create that also takes advantage of some of the lessons I've learned about storytelling since what I've learned in these two webcomics. I don't want to say too much about it other than I'm excited about it, and I hope I get a chance to do that. And it will definitely have guy-on-guy action in it, but it might be more PG-13 for the advertisers, or I'm just debating on that, but what it will be is it will be a story that's going to be much more accessible to a wide group of people. Okay, question over here, I think.
Thank you. I know that you said that when you have very, very explicit content, it limits a lot of your viewers. I've seen some web comics where they do it where it's PG-13 online, but when you buy the book, it's like you get extra goodies, and it's like the book itself is like rated R. Yeah. So how does that affect your webcomic as far as like what you can do and like advertisers and all that stuff? The fact that you don't have explicit things. Like, do you have any ideas on that?
Well, so a couple of thoughts. First of all, I mean, one comic that comes to mind that does that very particularly is Tea House. I mean, I might have mentioned Tea House is our genius when it comes to merchandising, much smarter than I will ever be. And that's what, and they do that. They leave the sex scenes out. They go right up to the sex scene. They show a little bit of something, and then if you really want to see the sex scene, you buy the book. And again, that's where most of your money is going to be in the book, and they're really smart about that. For me, as you know, my vibe is I don't want to hold anything back for my readers online, necessarily. But I think that is a good model to have, and I might take advantage of that at some point, possibly. But again, even R-rated is too much for most advertisers. By not being X-rated, that did allow me to use Project Wonderful. There was a time when Project Wonderful wouldn't even let you, if you had an adult content on there, they wouldn't even let you advertise, and that would have meant I had no place that I could have had posted advertising on my site, or even advertised outside of things. So there's still an advantage for going R-rated and saving your NC-17 X-rated content for another venue. So it's just something to think about when you're planning this out. But no matter what, you want to make sure that you're not shortchanging your readers online. And so when you plan it out, make sure they're getting enough of what it is so they can fully enjoy the scene. And then again, it's the idea of freemium, where if they want a little something extra, then they can buy the book and get the extra goodies. Okay, I think we have time for one more question because I got the warning there. Yes.
I have a question about if you have multiple comics under your same, say you have your, like kind of like Chaos Comics, if anybody reads those. They've got multiple comics all on one site and you can click on each different one, or would you say to get a different domain name for each individual comic?
By my lights, I mean, I host both Artifice and The Unprotectors in the same site, and from just the point of view of advertising, like what advertisers care about is how many clicks you have per month or per day. And by having it all in the same domain name, all those clicks are collected together. And seeing how you're showing the same advertising together, you want, you know, it's not being dishonest, it's being completely honest, and it's maximizing your audience. By my lights, unless you're going to do something, and this is something I'm considering for that future comic, if I decide to go more PG with it, maybe. If that I might put on a different site, because then I could have access to different advertisers. You know, because what they care about is what's on the whole site. But if that's not a concern for you, then I definitely think posting all your comics on one site is just going to be in your interest, stats-wise.
That's what Chaos does. They have two sites, one for art and one for not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then they don't have ads on it.
Do I have one more quick question? question before we sign up? Okay, quick question.
Do you have any resources for that storytelling element that's really important in webcomics? Not just the art, but the story itself.
Sure. I mean, in the back of this book, actually, I talk about my whole process, and this might be useful. Also, on my website, I have a FAQ. If you go to artificecomic.com or numberdiggers.com, I have a booth, actually, booth number 9, where you can pick up cards, which have my website. Please come by my booth. I'll pick up the book. If you go to my site, there's a FAQ, a fact, up on top, where I link to different articles that I put up. Some are about writing. If you go to my Tumblr page, you just do a tag search for writing, you'll find a bunch of things that I believe in. But again, like I said, I believe very much in coming into writing the ending first, essentially, and working your way to that, and knowing where you're going. That works about half the writers. The other half of writers, I recommend you read a book by Stephen King called On Writing, where he takes the opposite approach, where he doesn't want to know where he's going, he wants to be completely organic. I think that sometimes hurts his endings, but you can't argue with success. And the book is really very engaging, and it really will encourage you to do a word count every day, like a word target every day, which I think is essential if you're going to keep your momentum going as a writer. So, I want to thank you all for being an awesome audience and for great questions. Hope this was helpful.